His name is Knuckleduster, and I'm the Crawler.
My Hero Academia Vigilantes' second episode is out, titled Takeoff. Of course, we are going to be breaking down the episode as well as the entire season each week, so be sure to Detroit smash that like button and subscribe to the Kidoroki channel so that way you don't miss any My Hero Academia Vigilantes content. Now, the episode begins with Pop asking Koichi if she's ever heard of the hero Eraserhead, and a scared Koichi shakes his head no. Of course, we know thanks to the mainline series that Aizawa stood out of the spotlight, keeping a low profile so that he couldn't be recognized by people and villains. Aizawa states that he's off duty today, claiming just to be a good Samaritan. Knuckleduster claims to be the same, and both Pop and Koichi freak out, thinking Aizawa sees them all as villains. Aizawa drops his bag of groceries that's filled with eye drops, since after using his eraser quirk, his eyes tend to become dry, and a cat magazine because he likes cats. Eraserhead and Knuckleduster begin to fight, and Aizawa evades Knuckleduster's blows and is able to counter with a kick to Knuckleduster's face. Knuckleduster pushes through and flings Aizawa in the air by his binding cloth. Aizawa believes Knuckleduster has a durability-based quirk since he was able to push through the pain of his kick, and Aizawa uses his eraser quirk to disable the quirk of Knuckleduster's. Aizawa lands another kick on Knuckleduster's face, but he once again pushes through the pain. And that's when Aizawa realizes what Knuckleduster's quirk really is. After the opening, Aizawa and Knuckleduster are still going at it, and man, does the animation for this fight look so good for such a small scale 1v1. The man with the briefcase hurries off, and Pop notices something familiar about the man. She checks her phone and realizes from the pictures of instant villain sightings, the man with the briefcase is always around whenever a villain suddenly appears. Pop tells Koichi to stop the man, and the man begins to run. They chase after the man with the briefcase, but that's when Koichi is stopped by Soga and his trigger-induced gang. Soga claims he's sick of Koichi one-upping them, and we switch over to Aizawa pulling back his scarf, dusting himself off, ending the fight with Knuckleduster, and apologizes to Knuckleduster, claiming that there was a misunderstanding. Since there's been no improper quirk use, he doesn't have any reason to detain him and mistakenly thought he was a villain. Knuckleduster smiles, replying that he gets that a lot, and turns away to smoke. Aizawa thinks to himself how suspicious Knuckleduster is, and reveals the fact that since his eraser didn't work against him, meant that Knuckleduster was quirkless and just a tough opponent, making Knuckleduster an even bigger parallel to All Might, as Knuckleduster is essentially the Batman of the My Hero Academia universe, being a quirkless mentor to the main protagonist, while All Might is more of the Superman figure who happens to also be quirkless and is the mentor of the main protagonist in My Hero Academia. Before Aizawa can do anything, screams can be heard as villains are attacking. Koichi is being chased down by a now trigger-induced Soga. In the manga, we actually do get to see Soga inject himself with trigger, but for the anime, that tiny scene was cut out to save on time. Soga turns into a ball of spikes to try and roll over and impale Koichi. Soga crashes into a wall, missing Koichi, but the other trigger-induced thug comes in wondering if Koichi forgot all about him. Knuckleduster then pulls up with a brick in hand, stating, "Guess you forgot that I'm here," once again borrowing the phrase from All Might, and hits the villain with a fist full of brick to the back of the head, knocking him out. Soga gets back up running for Koichi, but the anime adds in Knuckleduster throwing the brick at Soga, knocking him back to the ground. Soga gets back up again to get Koichi and is captured by Aizawa, with Aizawa stating that taking down guys like you is a hero's job, even though he's off duty today. Knuckleduster and Koichi head off to find Popstep, who is still chasing after the salaryman. Pop is then kicked into the man with the briefcase, dropping his toys. The man reaches for the All Might figure, and with a menacing look, pops off the head of the figure, revealing it to be the drug, and injects himself with trigger. The man grows into a giant with 4 arms and snatches up both Pop and the trigger-induced thug, and begins to play with the two like they are action figures. The anime does add in the little detail that the man's quirk is called Playtime. From below, a man takes out his cell phone to take a picture while the other man yells at him to call for a hero. This, of course, being a jab at society and how people are way too quick to take out their phones to record a horrific or terrifying event for clout instead of calling the police or helping. Knuckleduster, on his Batman timing, uses a grappling hook to swing off of a building and kick the giant villain across the to face, causing him to lose his grip on Pop Step. Unfortunately, the giant villain swats Knuckleduster out of the sky, causing him to hit the sidewalk in front of Koichi, with Koichi calling Knuckleduster master. Pop slips through the villain's hand, and Koichi sees her falling out of the sky. Koichi gets in position and begins to use his quirk, remembering what Pop had asked earlier about why Koichi was tagging along with Knuckleduster, and the answer being obvious: because he wants to be a hero. Koichi leaps onto the side of a building, activating his quirk and sliding up the building at full speed. Deep down, Koichi knows that he doesn't have a chance at going pro at this point in his life, but if only for a second, he just wants to fly. He launches himself off of the building and catches Pop in midair and tells her to leap off of him. She lands on top of a building safely, but now Koichi is the one falling to his death. The giant villain smacks down at Koichi with his palm open, and Koichi quickly thinks to use his quirk on the giant villain's palm in order to slide off and change the angle he's falling at, which lands him into a giant pile of trash, calling back to Knuckleduster in the previous episode, using the pile of trash to cushion his landing. I won't say this every time it happens, but Koichi's thought process in this moment is removed from the anime. Things aren't over just yet, as the giant villain goes in for another punch at Koichi. Luckily for him, Aizawa shows up and uses his quirk on the giant villain, and he begins to shrink down in size, with Aizawa capturing the villain, ending the instant villain rampage. After the police show up, Aizawa thanks Knuckleduster for his help, and Knuckleduster tells him that they pick up the slack and do what the pro heroes can't, like beating up those thugs before they have a chance to do evil. Knuckleduster admitting to premeditated assault, Aizawa says he has some serious character flaws, and Knuckleduster replies with, "I get told that a lot." In the alley, Koichi tells Pop how he really thought he was going to die after he saved her. Pop turns away, blushing, letting him know that she was going to thank him, but he's being annoying, talking down about himself. Knuckleduster tells Koichi that he did a good job landing in the trash like he did, but there's still more for him to learn. Koichi tries to lie about not wanting to be his student, but Knuckleduster calls him out about how during the fight, Koichi called him master. Words and actions that pop out without thinking reveal how a person really feels. Koichi just needs to admit it to himself that he wants to be a hero. The anime here removes the narration from Koichi about this being the first day he flew. The next day, two middle school students named Ichimoku Samazu, who appeared in the first episode in the crowd at Pop's street performance, and Jubei Namimaru begin to fight each other using their quirks in public, causing a scene. Right off the bat, the two are obvious references to Wolverine and Cyclops from the X-Men. Not only is Ichimoku's last name Samazu meant to sound like Summers, referencing Cyclops' real name Scott Summers, but the two middle schoolers' quirks are nods to Wolverine's and Cyclops' mutant abilities. Jubei's quirk gives him the ability to have wooden swords come out of his hands, functioning similarly to Wolverine's claws, with Jubei even rocking a hat and belt with X symbols on it, further referring to the X-Men. Ichimoku's quirk, on the other hand, allows him to shoot beams from his eyes like Cyclops, and he even has a visor that was a clear inspiration from the leader of the X-Men as well. Now, you would think that this would be all there is to these characters that reference Wolverine and Cyclops, but nope, they even have this little rivalry with each other on top of their shared love of Pop Step that we see in a bit that makes fun of Wolverine and Cyclops' complicated relationship and friendship with Jean Grey. We then see a flashback of Knuckleduster giving Koichi protective gear, making it easier for Koichi to not wipe out and so he can go faster. This scene is slightly changed, as originally Koichi is showing him a scar that he got when he was younger from going too fast with his quirk, and Pop is also removed from the flashback. Koichi slides in to stop the two from fighting, but crashes into a bunch of trash. Back to the flashback, Knuckleduster tells Koichi that he needs a new name because the villains won't respect someone calling himself Nice Guy. Koichi then announces himself to the two middle schoolers that he is the Crawler, the name of course being inspired by everyone's favorite wall crawler, Spider-Man, and the way Koichi poses when using his quirk. The two then proceed to bond over beating up Koichi, and that's when Knuckleduster shows up, threatening to beat up the kids. Pop Step comes down and the two become starstruck as Pop Step gives them autographs and berates Koichi and Knuckle. An actual instant villain causes trouble nearby, claiming to be Among the chaos, a woman's baby flies out of a stroller, and the crawler slides in at high speed, catching the baby before hitting the ground. Knuckleduster then jumps in to fight the villain, punching the villain in the face, but he tanks the punch and hits Knuckle back, sending him crashing into the street. The villain yells, showing his tongue is darkened from the use of trigger, and Knuckleduster gets excited and jumps back into the fight. The villain lands a kick on Koichi, but Koichi is able to take the hit thanks to his armor upgrades. Koichi slides back in as Knuckleduster tackles the villain, with the crawler coming in from behind, swiping the back of the villain's leg, causing the villain to fall backwards. With Knuckleduster on top, he punches the villain, and in order to not let the villain recover, he repeatedly punches the villain until he's knocked out, which shocks both Jubei and Ichimoku. Knuckleduster analyzing the villain's hardening quirk did really remind me of All Might analyzing the Nomu's shock absorption quirk and getting around its limits by punching really hard and really fast, which was a cool callback to the mainline series. Knuckleduster tells Koichi to get a picture of the man's tongue, which confuses Jubei and Ichimoku, and Pop tells them that taking Trigger turns your tongue black and they should notify her if something comes up about Trigger. The police are on their way and the Vigilantes begin to make their exit. Jubei asks Koichi who are they, and Koichi tells him that they are Knuckleduster and the Crawler, and they go off into the sunset. Unfortunately, the anime does remove a huge cameo appearance from Deku as All Might flies over him. Hopefully the cameo does eventually appear in the anime as an intro for a future episode of sorts, but as of what's been covered so far, the Izuku Midoriya cameo doesn't get adapted. At night, the police are investigating the incident. Sansa makes a return from the main series, discussing with the detective about the instant villain. After hearing what eyewitnesses said about heroes taking down the villain and how there were no reports of heroes being in the area, the detective reveals himself to be Naomasa, who also makes a return from the main series as well, and he comes to the conclusion that vigilantes are on the loose, and even if they're fighting villains or not, laws exist for a reason, and vigilantism is a crime, letting us know that Naomasa is going to be on the hunt for the vigilantes. Back at Koichi's apartment, Pop reads out to Koichi what was being said about him and Knuckle, and she says that they were being called Freaky Fist Grandpa and the Cruller. The episode ends with Koichi being upset that they got his name wrong. Now, this episode covered 2 chapters, them being chapters 2 and 3. The animation for the episode was really good. So far, really loving the more grounded approach to the series, with it having that classic villain of the week format suited for the story. I've been loving the Easter eggs to all the inspirations behind the characters, though it sucks that Deku didn't make the cut for the episode. Overall, great episode, and I can't wait to see the next one. Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on the second episode of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. And with that said, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and be sure to subscribe to the Kidoroki channel with notifications on so that you don't miss any My Hero Academia Vigilantes content. Now see you all in the next one.